What's up guys? If you know me, you're probably aware of the fact that I've had a custom track competition server for about 2 years now. That server is the Mario Kart Wii competition hub, and the basic premise of it is that people try to create a custom track in a very limited time, and then the tracks are being voted on with the highest scoring one winning the competition. Last year I already ranked every single track that was made for the competition hub in 2024, so naturally it's now time to rank every single track that was made for the competition hub in 2025. This ranking is purely based off my opinion on these tracks, so the actual results in each competition will not have an impact on this list. Like last year, I've also made some of the tracks that are on this list, so I will once again try to be as objective and neutral as possible. Disqualified tracks once again won't be included, simply because a lot of them aren't even MKWii custom tracks. And lastly, before we get started with this ranking, I quickly just want to note that for every track I'm gonna show a score between 1 and 10. Generally, the track quality this year was pretty high, so even if a track places rather low on the list, its score will more accurately reflect on how I actually view the track. So with all that being said, let's now get into this ranking. 107. Mario Meet Me When Black Ice Freeze 4. This track was created by Melodic Cat Girl for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed last. And man, it was a deserved last place, to say the least. I am pretty certain on the fact that this is my least favorite custom track ever made. The entire point of this track is just to be as janky and frustrating as possible. And unlike most other joke tracks, this one actually pulled it off. I mean, just look at this footage. I'm not doing any crazy tricks here, I'm not trying to drive like this. It's literally the track bouncing me around like a mad lad. To beat the track, you have to clear a ton of really precise jumps, and honestly, I'm not even sure if they're all possible. The only time that I actually beat this track, I did it by accidentally skipping a key checkpoint, and that still took ages to do. Like, this track just gave me a bunch of mental breakdowns. It is horrible. 106. Desert Bus, but it's actually Monochrome Malfunction. This track was made by Elemental for the bad EXTR6 competition, where it placed 3rd. Yeah, so the 6th edition of Epic Crossover's Extreme Remake competition was actually split into a good and a bad sub-competition, and as you might imagine, in the bad one, the goal was to make the lowest scoring track instead of the highest scoring one. Now for this track, don't get me wrong, I love Desert Bus, I've played it 4 times as of recording this. This track though is definitely a bit different, because the checkpoints on this track are still the same as on the original Monochrome Malfunction. That means to beat this track, you have to awkwardly drive through the off-road with no sort of visual indicator to tell you where you need to go. In other words, in an online race, this track is basically impossible to beat, and it still places above Mario Meet Me When Black Ice Freeze 4. That's how bad that track is. 105. The Track With No Name. This track was made by Epic Crossover for the bad EXTR6 competition, where it placed 2nd. Now this one is basically Black Ice Freeze, but without any respawns. It is actually possible to beat this track in an online race by memorizing the layout, which I actually did for a recording, but like, realistically speaking, nobody's gonna have a fun time on this one. 104. CT Jam Quiz 4. No, I'm not gonna pronounce that other word. This track was made by Morse, Forntint Kit and Bits for the 4th MRFI competition, where it tied for last. It's definitely a step up from the previous tracks. You can actually see where you need to go, you can actually tell where you need to go, and it is not stupidly hard to go where you need to go. However, that's all the praise that I can give this one. It is an over 3-minute long straightaway. There is no gameplay here, there is just nothing. 103. Violacious Glide. This track was made by Epic Crossover for the 4th MRFI competition, where it tied for last. Yeah, I can see why these 2 tracks tied for last, as they're basically both the same thing. This is also an empty straightaway, but it's a lot shorter. The advantage of this is that it's not as boring. The disadvantage is that if you start in last, you probably will get last. This track definitely still ranks higher because I simply prefer driving straight for 20 seconds over driving straight for 3 minutes. 102. Fred's Freakway. This track was created by Pooks for the bad EXTR6 competition, where it placed 1st. So yeah, here we have our first competition winner of this list, and it's definitely a not that surprising one. It's basically just a huge Kaizo course. As a concept, I actually enjoy this track quite a bit. It incorporates a lot of different gameplay methods, and I think the difficulty overall is pretty well made. My main issue with this track, and the reason why it places so low, is its length. If you play well, 1 lap takes you at best 4 minutes to complete, and this track for whatever reason is 4 laps. So even if you're a skilled player, you're for sure gonna be here for at least 15 minutes. That also makes this track truly impossible to beat in an online race, as the 5-minute maximum timer easily runs out before most people will even be in the 2nd lap. 101, Forces Kisser. This track was designed by Kura and created by Epic Crossover for the 9th CTSS competition, where it placed last. This is another track that's mostly about driving straight. You do have to turn once, so I guess that's great. But on a serious note, the actual reason this places higher than some other tracks on this list is simply because it has a much better length. It's long enough so that starting positions don't really matter, but it's not too long to the point where you fall asleep during the race. 100, Air. No, not that one. Yes, that one. This track was made by Forntint Kid, Morse, and Power Player Plus for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 30th. We have finally arrived at our first track that has an actual layout, but that's pretty much everything that this track has going for it. The entire road is made out of off-road collision, except for invisible boost panels, so if you don't know where they are, they can easily shoot you off the track, and of course there's no respawn points. Furthermore, this track is also just really long, but hey, there's at least like turns and stuff. We're making progress. 99, Black Ice Free 6, We Light and Fred We Trust. This track was created by Epic Crossover and myself for the Bad EXTR 6 competition, where it placed 4th. This being the final track of the Black Ice Free series, it definitely is a lot easier to play than most of the other tracks in it. The layout is quite simplistic here, and the track is also fairly visible compared to the rest. But of course, it is Black Ice Free, so you do need a good amount of TV brightness to play this one. 98, MKWii Baby Park. This track was created by Morse for the 4th MRFI competition, where it placed 7th. I do prefer this to the actual Baby Park simply because it's a bit more spaced out, so it feels slightly less like a battle arena and more like a racetrack, although not really the strongest racetrack. It does have a very nice looking road texture though. 97, Deciduous Dive Sky. This track was made by Morse for the 4th MRFI competition, where it placed 6th. We have arrived at our first serious track on this list. It took a lot shorter than last year, thank god. This is also where a lot of the more simplistic tracks are gonna fall on this list. For example, on this one, a lot of the track just consists of really stretched out turns, which in turn makes it quite slow paced. There is an okay shortcut at the end, but otherwise this track isn't really that interesting. 96, Monochrome Big Function. This track was made by Sanic 9KVR for the Bad EXTR 6 competition, where it placed last. This is the only track from the Bad EXTR 6 competition that doesn't place in the bottom 10 in this ranking. And that's simply because this one's a lot more inoffensive than the others. It's just a very big and very simplistic layout. You do drive straight a lot, it's kind of boring, but it's not really bad at all. There's even a ramp for good measure. 95, Hostile Warp Pipe In. This track was created by Power Player Plus for the 9th FCFS competition, where it placed last. I do like quite some of the ideas on this track. I think using the cannons to go between the rooms is pretty cool. However, this track is very underscaled, and in turn it's also a very difficult track. Definitely not a track that I dislike, but I can't really rate it higher because of this. 94, Tour Piercing Journey. This track was made by Forntint Kid, Floof Doggy, and Morse for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 29th. This is easily one of the most simplistic tracks of this year. However, it actually has decent scaling, it's not way too long, so I don't really dislike playing this at all, it's just like kind of boring. 93, Overly Pale Paradise. No, not that one. Yes, that one. This track was made by Morse for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 27th. This is actually a lot more interesting than most of the previous tracks. There are a lot of ramps here on this layout, which is nice. However, the turns are pretty bumpy, and if you fall off the track, there are no respawns besides at the very start. And this track is also quite long, so falling off is definitely very punishing. 92, Actually. This track was created by Elemental and Forntint Kid for the 7th EXTR competition, where it tied for 25th. This is about the most basic joke track that you could ask for. The layout is very simplistic, it's played very safe, and as such I have neither positive nor negative feelings on this track. 91, Boy Kisser City. This track was designed by Kura and created by Iron Flash for the 10th CTSS competition, where it placed last. The visuals here are actually not that bad, it's just a layout that keeps this track down here. Besides a single ramp, the whole track is flat and consists of just 90-degree turns. It is scaled pretty well though, so I don't really have an issue with playing this. 90, Transfer and Download from Sales. This track was made by Morse for the 9th FCFS competition, where it placed 9th. While most sections on this track are definitely a bit overscaled, overall this one does provide more variety in the gameplay than most tracks that we saw previously. There's a Shy Guy ship shooting cannonballs, there are some ramps, and there's even a small shortcut. It just doesn't really have any particularly strong sections. 89, Monochrome Multiverse. This track was made by Xander Kart Wii and Epic Crossover for the Good EXTR 6 competition, where it placed last. And this is where we're starting to see quite significant improvements when it comes to the gameplay. This track overall feels quite fun, although some turns are definitely a bit too tight. I suppose it's also just not the most memorable track. 88, DE Deadline Decay. This track was made by myself and Melodic Cat Girl for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 21st. I promise I did not put this one at number 88 on purpose. It's a pretty simplistic joke track, but it actually has a decently fun layout. There are are a lot of ramps on this track and they're mostly very fun to take, but that's basically all that this track has to offer. 87. Slipskate Slope. This track was made by Potato Man 44 for the 8th FCFS competition where it placed last. As someone that really enjoys Bowser's Fury, it's definitely cool to see a track based on that game. Slipskate Slope was also a pretty logical choice for which level to recreate in Mario Kart Wii, and this recreation is quite faithful to the original level. That does come with the disadvantage that most of this track is basically just a straight line, and unfortunately it's also on the more overscaled side of things. I definitely do enjoy quite some sections on this track, but these issues sadly keep it down here. 86. Fred Fred's Freeze. This track was made by Epic Crossover and myself for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 28. I am probably ranking this one a bit too high considering it's just a very simplistic joke track, but I do genuinely find the gameplay here decently fun. One section is a bit blind and I think it kind of makes the gameplay more interesting. Besides that, there's some more fun ramps and most of the track is very well scaled. 85. Circle Circuit City. No, not that one. Yes, that one. This track was made by Epic Crossover for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 24th. It's very simplistic, there's not a lot of turns, but there are some solid ramps here. There's really not much more to say about this one. 84. Jump Ropes Villainous Fitness Plan. This track was made by Lucio Wins for the 8th FCFS competition where it placed 5th. I really enjoy the unique concept that this track goes for. I especially like the shortcut as it involves a lot of risk and reward. The track does entirely consist of slippery roads and that unfortunately makes some of these turns very hard. Although since the rest of the track is already supposed to be sort of a challenge course, I don't think that takes way too much away from its potential. 83. Fiery Financial Fire. This track was made by Epic Crossover and Char6432 for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 10th. Like many tracks in this section of the list, this one has a pretty simplistic layout. It is overall fun, but just not overly exciting. 82. Flaxen Basswood Passage. This track was made by Epic Crossover for the Good EXTR6 competition where it placed 6th. I wanted to place this one higher because this actually has a lot of really good sections. However, there are some major flaws in the layout. Both cannons on this track are followed up immediately by really tight turns. If you trick on these cannons, it's basically impossible to clear these turns even on Flame Runner. And even if you don't trick on the cannons, on most vehicles, it's near impossible to clear the turns without slowing down. Again, the rest of the layout here is pretty good, but these issues bring the track down here sadly. 81. Monochrome Malfunction DX. This track was made by Epic Crossover for the Good EXTR6 competition where it placed 8th. This is more simplistic than the previous track, but in turn it doesn't have any major design flaws. I also like the little ramp shortcut, it makes the track ever so slightly more interesting. 80. Sky Sky Skyway. No, not that one. Yes, that one. This track was created by Melodic Cat Girl and Mount Olympus for the 7th EXTR competition where it tied for 25th. This one I'm definitely placing too high, but it's simply one of those dumb fun tracks. I just love spamming the tricks to get up as fast as possible. You can also skip the final turn, which is relatively easy, but not too easy to the point that it's free. I don't know, I just kind of like playing this one to be honest. 79. Monochrome Successfully Functioning. This track was made by Sanic 9KVR for the Good EXTR6 competition where it placed 5th. It's a really short and really simplistic track. The one ramp on this track is placed kind of in a weird way. You will pretty much always overshoot the mushroom platform, so your best bet usually is just trying to skip the whole gap. This is actually fairly precise and it makes the track quite a bit more interesting. 78. What the fuck is a requirement? This track was made by myself for the 2nd RQRP competition where it placed last. Yeah, I may or may not have gone out of my way to complete none of the competition's 30 requirements. It's actually a pretty fun and fast-paced layout, but it's also a very short track. I know some people really enjoy this one for some reason, but I'm just kind of like, it's okay. 77. Nabbit Courier Service. This track was made by Iron Flash for the 9th FCFS competition where it placed 2nd. In case you're wondering how this plays above so many serious tracks in that competition, it actually had a special requirement where Iron Flash had to get a 4 out of 10, and if he didn't get a 4 out of 10, then the difference between his actual score and the 4 out of 10 would be deducted from the score of the then highest scoring first come first serve track. But as close as Iron Flash got to getting a 4 out of 10, I think it's better than that. Sure, the visuals are non-existent, but there's actually quite some fun sections in this layout. 76. The Magical Fred Statue that turns all the trees upside down. This track was designed by Epic Crossover and created by Elemental for the 11th CTS CTSS competition where it placed last. It's a very short and simplistic track, but it's quite fun to go off the ramps. If this was a longer, more fleshed out layout, it could be a really good track. 75. Sinking C2E Ski. This track was created by Morse for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 16th. Once again, it's more on the simplistic side, but it does look slightly more fleshed out visually. There's a solid gap jump shortcut, but the rest is pretty monotone. 74. Land of the Giant Apples. This track was designed by J2000 and created by PowerPlayer Plus for the 11th CTSS competition where it placed 3rd. Layout wise, this is an improvement for sure. Some sections are still on the more simplistic side, but there are some pretty interesting ramps and a shortcut as well. The track does have an off-road glitch whenever you go off the mushrooms, which is mandatory for the layout, so that's mainly why I can't really place it higher. 73. Without Women Wonderland. This track was made by myself for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 23rd. This is another track that I'm definitely ranking way too high. Obviously, since it's a joke track, the visuals are non-existent, but there's just something really satisfying about the gameplay. For whatever reason, the boost ramp collision makes your vehicle drift differently, which gives this a really unique feel. There's also a large turn skip shortcut, which is really satisfying to take. Just be sure to choose the correct path at the start of the track, otherwise you won't have such a fun time. 72. Stupid Are Dinosaurs Narcissistic Forest. This track was designed by Rex and created by Melodic Cat Girl for the 9th CTSS competition where it placed 4th. This is certainly one of the best looking tracks that we've seen on this list so far, although the gameplay isn't that strong here. Some sections are pretty fun, but most of the track feels pretty empty. 71. Baum Deluxe. This track was created by myself for the 4th MRFI competition where it placed 5th. Sure, it's another joke track, but the gameplay here is actually pretty decent, although nothing extraordinary. I mean, you basically just take a bunch of ramps. You do also get punished pretty heavily on the round 2 version whenever you fall off. This was removed again in the official release, but updates aren't counted, so let's just say it doesn't really help this track's placement. 70. Sinking Swamp. This track was designed by MacroDude123 and created by PowerPlayer Plus for the 10th CTSS competition where it placed 8th. I actually really like the overall visual style of this track, and the gameplay also does have some really good ideas. Most sections are quite interesting to play, and there's even some shortcuts. However, it looks like Power once again messed up the mushroom KCL, as just like on Land of the Giant Apples, there's an off-road glitch here. It doesn't matter as much here because this track doesn't have much off-road, but it does mean that wheelies give you no speed boost at all. 69. Cooper Air. This track was made by Kozakura for the 9th FCFS competition where it placed 8th. This track is nice. Jokes aside, it's actually a pretty good track. It had a pretty difficult requirement because it wasn't allowed to feature any reference to Cooper, and in turn it's a rather generic grass track. The layout is pretty fun at most sections, there are some shortcuts even. However, I'm pretty confused by the split pathways. One of them pretty much is 30 seconds slower. Of course, you can just ignore the slow pathway, but it's still kind of weird that it's there in the first place. 68. Air. No, not that one. Yes, that one. This track was made by Iggy Zakupa for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 22nd. This definitely has an interesting gameplay premise. The entire layout has the same constellation of half pipes, boost ramps, and trackable road, so it's really fun to figure out what's the fastest way to clear this track. It's definitely a lot better than its name sibling. 67. Circle Circuit City. No, not that one. Yes, that one. This track was made by PowerPlayer Plus and Forntint Kid for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 14th. Honestly, I wish I could place this higher because there are quite some really good design choices. I actually like pretty much every single section of this layout. However, the main issue with this track is simply that it's relatively janky. The road is quite bumpy at parts and some ramps feel a bit weird too. But I think you can pretty easily tell that the quality here is increasing quite substantially. 66. Peaceful Crossing. This track was made by Kura for the 1st RQRP competition where it placed 2nd. I really like the custom casino roulette object. It both looks pretty interesting and it also provides for a nice sort of offside ramp. I'm not as fond of the tree section as the turns there are really tight even on Flame Runner, but overall there's fun to be had here. 65. Women of Racing Organization. This track was made by Kura for the 9th FCFS competition where it placed 7th. It's pretty interesting to me how you get the choice of 2 different split pathways for the first 2 laps, and then on lap 3 you just get to skip both of them. The gameplay has its ups and downs. The before mentioned split pathways are basically just a bunch of left and right turns, but the remaining track is much better than that. The split pathways are pretty long, so this track gets dragged down quite a bit by them. 64. Blazing Beach. This track was designed by Orcahedron and created by Elemental for the 10th CTSS competition where it placed 6th. It's basically the definition of a short and sweet track. The layout isn't too exciting, but it's just quite fun. The track has a cool theme and I like the shortcut. 63. Onyx Outskirts. This track was made by Kura for the 2nd RQRP competition where it placed 3rd. This is very different from what we've seen so far. This is a very large, complex and fleshed out track, and I think it's quite fun. I think it does a fine job at fulfilling its half-pipe requirement. But why does it place so low then? Well, there's one tiny issue here. It fucking crashes. It's not an instant crash at least, but in an offline race, you're basically guaranteed to never finish this track. That was fixed later, but since updates aren't included on this list, I unfortunately have to place it lower than it would be otherwise. 62. Gold Goomba Gorge. This track was created by Epic Crossover, Morse and Watcher X1221 for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 15th. Yeah, now we're back to the relatively simplistic but pretty solid tracks. There isn't really anything too wrong with this layout. I like the split pathways towards the end alongside its big jumps. Those are pretty cool. 61. No, Not Now. This track was created by Igizakupa, Forntint Kit and Morse for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 12th. Gameplay wise, this honestly feels really similar to the original Piercing Journey, and visually it definitely looks quite a bit better. They even included the ending turn skip, which I'm quite happy about. 60. Tetriverse. This track was made by Elemental for the 5th MRFI competition where it placed 6th. I'm already a fan of the concept of having a Tetris themed track, especially when you actually drive on the Tetris blocks, and this goes even further, using the blocks to create shortcuts. And there are a lot of shortcuts here. Most of them are shroomless as well. They are not that easy, but if you're good at the game, you can really optimize your gameplay here. If I was good at the game, this track would certainly place higher. 59. Yoshi Hangar. This track was designed by Potato Man 44 and created by Morse for the 9th CTSS competition where it placed 8th. For a first track, this low-key slaps. Yeah, the visuals aren't amazing, but the gameplay actually gets quite deep. There are numerous shortcuts here and all of them are really big. They are definitely this track's biggest strong suit. The remaining layout is pretty solid as well. 58. Watcher's Waterfront Way. This track was made by Watcher X1221 for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 13th. This is a huge step up from Watcher's previous tracks. There are a lot of really interesting design choices, like a ramp where you have to quickly turn around, an upstream river section, and a pretty solid shroomless shortcut. Really, the only issue here is that there are a few sections where you pretty much just drive straight. 57. Hey Buddy. This track was designed by Yosh46 and created by Atmosphere for the 10th CTSS competition where it placed 7th. It's definitely a unique layout. There's a lot of really tight turns, but they are manageable enough for sure. There are some solid alternate pathways and a little turn skip shortcut. We're definitely starting to get to a point where all tracks are quite interesting gameplay wise. 56. Sienna Stream. This track was made by Epic Crossover for the Good EXTR6 competition where it placed 7th. Visually it's rather simplistic, but it does have some pretty fun gameplay. The track is more on the short side, but it does have really great pacing. 55. Ribbon 86. This track was made by Elemental for the 9th FCFS competition where it placed 6th. Once again, this track also carries most of its impact through its gameplay. The overall layout, while not having anything revolutionary, is pretty good. However, this track's biggest strong suit is probably its shortcuts. There's actually a pretty good amount of them and all of them feel decently creative. 54. Morse Circuit. This track was created by Morse for the 4th MRFI competition where it placed 3rd. At first glance, this seems like a very simplistic and flat circuit track with not really much to it, but this does actually offer some pretty interesting gameplay elements. In particular, I really enjoy the shortcuts and I also appreciate the use of the chain jumps. Also, by the way, this track marks the halfway point of the list, meaning there's 53 tracks above and 53 tracks below this track. 53. Yoshi Worldway. This track was designed by Yosh46 and created by Rex for the 9th CTSS competition where it placed 5th. From this point onwards, we're actually seeing a massive increase in how expansive the layouts are. This one features multiple cannons, a really fun river section, and some mushrooms that can give you the flying glitch when you respawn on top of them. It could be a bit shorter considering not every single section is super interesting, but still, we've gotten to a point where I don't really have any major complaints about the gameplay. 52. 1-3. This track was created by Igizakupa for the Good EXTR6 competition where it placed 9th. This one has actually been one of my biggest growers ever since I first played it. Sure, the whole layout is just a straight line, but there is surprisingly still a lot of depth in the gameplay. You can take like a billion different routes to get to the end of this one. There are some split pathways that are very difficult, but all of them are completely avoidable. 51. Into... Why does this word appear again? Anyways, this track was made by Forntint Kit, Morse and Power Player Plus for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 19th. I definitely think this one was underrated. Pretty much every single section here brings a new gameplay element, and the vast majority of the track is also very fun to play. There is one section that's pretty misleading, both because it's a blind jump and the minimap doesn't really help either, but obviously this becomes a non-issue when you get more experience with the track. 50. Very Vibrant Village. This track was made by Kozakura and Morse for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed 6th. I know I'm placing this quite quite low, but trust me, I still really like this one. It actually looks pretty good visually, and there are some sections that I really enjoy. I do think most sections of this track are more on the forgettable side, but it's still a good track by all accounts. 49, Bad Egg Forest. This track was designed by Pooks and created by Elemental for the 9th CTSS competition, where it placed 6th. This one has many good ideas on the gameplay side of things. I think it's interesting how the track crosses over itself at one section, and there's a lot of shortcuts, including some shroomless ones. The one shroom shortcut on this track does have a really difficult exit, which even on Flame Runner you'll definitely struggle with. 48, Pale Garden or something, IDK, I haven't played Minecraft. This track was created by Elemental for the Good EXTR6 competition, where it placed 4th. I should probably subtract some points for the Minecraft slander, but thankfully this track is at least pretty good. I really enjoy the visual style. It's very different from pretty much everything else. The layout is rather simplistic, but does come with some pretty good shortcuts. 47, Fred's Birthday Party. This track was made by Dreecasty Turnip for the Good EXTR6 competition, where it placed 2nd. And this is where it becomes very clear that I care much more about the gameplay than the visuals. Visually speaking, this looks absolutely gorgeous. It is easily one of the best looking tracks that has been made for the competition up in this year. However, the gameplay doesn't really take any risks, and it's very simplistic. I do like the one shortcut, and I also like the pokies, but otherwise this is a very simplistic layout. 46, Old Side. This track was created by Melodic Cat Girl for the 2nd RQRP competition, where it placed 1st. Here we've got our first competition winner, besides Bad EXTR6. And while it might be the weakest, it's also definitely one of the coolest. A large part of the track revolves around these weird ramps that make it go float, and in addition to that, there is also quite some really unique and cool shortcuts. It is a very unusual gameplay style that isn't super functional, but it's still a track that I really enjoy coming back to every now and then. 45, Steve's Crash Course. This track was created by myself and Atmosphere for the 5th MRFI competition, where it placed last. I don't say this often about my own tracks, but I do think this one was underrated a bit. It probably is just bias speaking, but let me explain. Firstly, I think the visuals worked out really well for this track actually. It is extremely faithful to the actual Minecraft game, and I think this is about as good as a Minecraft track can look. Sure, there are some small gameplay flaws, like a few turns that are a bit tight towards the start of the track, but on Flame Runner with enough practice, they are all manageable. I do see why it got last, simply because of how stacked MRFI 5 was, and I am still quite happy with the average score that this track got. 44, A Slight Misinterpretation of Factory Island. This track was created by Bits for the 8th FCFS competition, where it placed 1st. This is another competition winner that I'm placing quite low, but it does do a lot of things right. Firstly, the visuals are really good as expected with Bits, and I do also really enjoy all the shortcuts on this track. However, I don't find the main layout of this track to be really the strongest. On the first 2 laps, you drive on a pretty simplistic and short course, which I actually like quite a bit because all the shortcuts can be found here, but towards the end of lap 3, you are redirected on a much longer pathway, which is the main reason why this track finds itself here on the list. The gameplay here is definitely considerably weaker than the main layout, as it doesn't feature any shortcuts and consists mostly of long straightaways and very simplistic turns. The overall track is still good, but it would have probably done better without the alternate pathway. 43, Cerulean Speedway. This track was made by Kozakura for the 5th MRFI competition, where it placed 3rd. This is a fairly standard but quite solid track. Every section feels decently fun to drive, and there are some neat shroomless shortcuts. I also really like the custom Pokemon objects. 42, Black Sand Sea. This track was designed by Bluebat Star and created by Morse for the 10th CTSS competition, where it placed 5th. There's actually quite a lot of really memorable design elements on this track. I really enjoy the whale cannon, even though it's probably slower, and the shortcuts are also quite fun to take. Not all sections are super interesting, but as an overall package, this track still works very well. 41, Course Rayman-esque. This track was created by Iron Flash for the 5th MRFI competition, where it placed 5th. This is the kind of track that just gets better the more you play it. On your first playthrough, it will feel very jank, and to be fair, it kind of is, but once you get more experience with this track, a lot of sections will feel very satisfying. There are definitely some design choices that could be reconsidered, but still, I like occasionally playing tracks like this. 40, Pigeon Pipe Plan. This track was made by Epic Crossover for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 20th. This one definitely gets hard carried by its gameplay. I am especially a really big fan of the large jumps towards the end. There is one ramp at the beginning that can randomly give you a lot of air, but outside of that, there's not really any major complaints. 39, Lubba Loop. This track was made by Kozakura for the 2nd RQRP competition, where it placed 2nd. I can tell that Kozakura put a lot of effort into this one. Despite being 4 minutes long, it actually feels pretty interesting throughout most of the race. There are some solid shortcuts, and most sections bring a new idea to the table. However, However, if I'm being honest, I'm just not much of a one-lap track guy. Mount Wario from Mario Kart 8 is basically the only one that I consider to be exceptionally good. As well designed as Lubba Loop is, I still prefer playing many 3-lap tracks over this one. 38. Decay Deciduous Decisions. This track was created by Morris for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 18th. This is so much better than its prequel Deciduous Dive Sky. The scaling is very well done here, and there are a lot of shortcuts. My only minor complaint about this one is that the cannon isn't trickable. 37. Yoshi's Bayou. This track was designed by Sho and created by Pooks for the 9th CTSS competition, where it placed 7th. This was severely underrated for sure. I pretty much enjoy every single section on this track. There's a neat shortcut, I enjoy the mushroom section and the falling pillars, and unrelated to the ranking, but it's also actually a surprisingly fun track in hide and seek. 36. Coke Tastes Like Empty Pizza Box. This track was created by Elemental for the 8th FCFS competition, where it placed 4th. Firstly, I really appreciate the unique visual style. It's unlike anything else that we've seen this year. And secondly, the gameplay low-key slaps. The base layout isn't way too complex, but there are some pretty cool streamless strats. 35. Sky Sky Skyway. No, not that one. Yes, that one. This track was created by Elemental for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 11th. While visually it doesn't have a ton of background detail, I do find the posters hilarious. Gameplay-wise, this is also really fun. There's a neat little turn skip shortcut, and overall, it's just a track that feels good to play. 34. RMX Mushroom Peaks. This track was created by MacroDude123 for the 4th MRFI competition, where it placed 4th. You guys know that I love Mushroom Peaks and mushroom tracks in general, so it's no surprise that I also like this one. I do prefer when these tracks use the original mushroom object instead of modeling in new mushrooms, but MacroDude actually did a pretty good job at doing the latter. There's also a nice little shortcut on the mushroom section, however, I'm not really sure what the left split pathway in the section afterwards is for. It's very clearly slower, so I don't know why anyone would go for it. 33. Sunshine Paradise. This track was created by myself for the 8th FCFS competition, where it placed 2nd. It's definitely not the strongest track that I made this year. I think you can tell that it's a bit rushed. For example, in the cave section, you can very easily get soft locked, but I do think the general layout here is pretty good. I especially really enjoy the shortcuts. I think they're quite satisfying to take. I could have definitely tried to use more textures from the original Mario Sunshine, which another track later on this list does a lot better. 32. Iggy I'm In. This track was created by Iggy Zakupa for the 7th EXTR competition, where it tied for 3rd. This actually reminds me a lot of Mario Kart World's version of N64 Wario Stadium. There's a ton of different shortcuts and strats. I probably haven't even found all of them yet. Some of them do feel a little bit janked, but most of them are really fun to take. It's definitely one of Iggy's best efforts to date. 31. Château de Chantilly, situé à Chantilly. Please don't kill me, French viewers, I tried my best. Anyway, this track was created by Iron Flash for the Good EXTR6 competition, where it placed 3rd. Compared to most tracks up here, this is definitely more on the simplistic side. However, this track is solid proof that simplicity doesn't always equal bad. There's a pretty good number of shortcuts on this track, although pretty much only one of them is actually worth going for. Also, this doesn't really contribute to its position, but this track has some very cool secret areas. 30. The Dashlands. This track was designed by MacroDude123 and created by Iron Flash and Kazakura for the 11th CTSS competition, where it placed 2nd. I love Geometry Dash, so I can definitely appreciate having a track based on it in here. I think this uses both the spikes and the orbs pretty well, although you can actually get stuck between two spikes if you're really unlucky, but honestly, it's more entertaining than frustrating. 29. King Kinoko Kisser. This track was made by Iron Flash, Thorntint Kid and Morse for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 17th. By this point, there's really nothing that can make people appreciate mushroom tracks as much as they should be, because you cannot seriously tell me with a straight face that this absolute banger ended up this low. Nearly every single section feels incredibly satisfying to play through. The track finds a lot of creative ways to make you work with the mushroom physics, and there are some really good shortcuts for good measure. I will admit there's one section that's a bit of a stinker. It's impossible on most vehicles, and even on Flame Runner it's very hard. This section was changed to be a lot more functional in an update, which unfortunately doesn't count for this list. If updates were included here, I kid you not, this would easily make the top 5. 28. My Cool Mario Tractory. Smiley face. This track was designed by Pooks and created by Kura for the 10th CTSS competition, where it tied for 1st. This might just be the most complex track of the year. Every single lap opens up new pathways, and there's about 1 billion of them. Not to mention the countless shortcuts that also exist here. I can definitely see why this received by far the most 10 out of 10 votes out of all tracks ever. I'm sure that at least some of you guys watching will have this as your favorite comp-up track. However, I will have to ruin the party. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think this track is really good, but since you basically take a new pathway on every single lap, it kind of feels like a one-lap track in a way. And by now you guys know what I think of those. Also, I don't think many of the pathways have that exceptional gameplay, but in any case, there is no denying that this is some very impressive work. 27. Hey Highlands Hills. This track was created by Atmosphere, Jacobus VIII, and Morse for the 7th EXTR competition, where it tied for 3rd. This is honestly kind of a weird track, but it does bring a lot of good ideas. The acorns falling out of the big tree and acting as rolling obstacles are very creative. I like the way that the clear pipe looks. There's a nice little shroomless shortcut. I like the net towards the end. The split pathways at the start are kind of weird and a bit jank. 26. Plus Pass. This track was created by Melodic Cat Girl for the 4th MRFI competition, where it placed 2nd. It's actually very cool to finally have a serious take on this track, and it's actually extremely well executed. The gameplay here is super fun. The track has a really fast pace, and there's even a really cool shortcut where you have to turn around to take it. I do wonder when Minus Pass will get a serious rendition of its own. 25. Cyclopean City. This track was created by Billy Noodles for the 5th MRFI competition, where it placed 2nd. Visually speaking, this is probably the best looking track of the entire year. I don't think I even have to elaborate much on this. This track just looks absolutely stunning. The gameplay is also good for the most part. There are surprisingly many shroomless shortcuts, and I do also like that Lap 2 has an alternate pathway, though the track does actually have a lot of really long straightaways, which holds this back from placing higher. 24. Polychrome Prosperity. This track was created by Melodic Cat Girl and Kura for the Good EXTR6 competition, where it placed 1st. The base layout of this track isn't all too complex, and it's more on the shorter side, but where this track really shines is the shortcuts, especially the one that you access by flying off the half pipe. Not only is it really satisfying to take, but if you actually make it, you get cheered on by a custom boo object. That is an incredibly cute idea, and more tracks should make use of this. The visuals are also quite fun to look at. 23. Dolphin Marine Sports. This track was made by Bluebat Star for the 9th FCFS competition, where it placed 4th. What I like most about this track is that every single section feels completely different from one another. First you have some big jumps, then you have some trickable edges, then you fly through some rings, and next thing you know it, you're barreling down a water slide. It just feels like such a complete layout, and it's a very fun one as well. 22. Woodlands Woods World. This track was made by Dreecast Turnip for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 8th. As we expect with D-Turnip, the visuals are absolutely fantastic, and while the gameplay isn't anything out of this world, it's still very good. I'm a fan of the trickable bumps on the road, and there's a cool shortcut towards the end. 21. Corrupted Gravity Beach. This track was created by Melodic Cat Girl for the 1st RQRP competition, where it placed 1st. First of all, the visual concept here is super cool. I like how you can see parts of the track just flying into the sky at the start of the race, and I'm also a fan of how the corrupted rainbow fades into existence. Gameplay wise, this track has a pretty good number of shortcuts. It also has great scaling and a pretty fast pace. I think you can tell that I'm struggling to criticize anything about these tracks by this point. The only reason why I didn't give this a 10 out of 10 is because I don't think this track is super exceptional in any department. 20. CNK Electron Avenue. This track was made by Kura for the 5th MRFI competition, where it placed 4th. Visually, this definitely is one of Kura's best works, and the gameplay is also very enjoyable throughout the entire race. There are a couple fun shortcuts, there are some pretty unique ramps, and I also appreciate the addition of the half pipes. This is a pretty long track though, so 2 laps would have definitely been a lot better for this one. It certainly would have placed higher on this list, possibly in 10 out of 10 territory, if it had been 2 laps. 19. Overly Pale Paradise. No, not that one. Yes, that one. This track was made by Char6432 for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 5th. Char definitely outdid himself here. It's definitely his best looking track to date, and the gameplay is also very strong. I really enjoy the big shortcut at the end, and the track also has some pretty cool hiding spots. 18. Yoshi's Sylvan Slope. This track was designed by Nihonium and created by Bits for the 9th CTSS competition, where it placed 3rd. It may not be the most memorable track, but it's certainly a very strong one. I really enjoy the section with the boost panels where you have to avoid the Yoshi tongues. I can also always appreciate waterfalls being used as a small challenge, and there are some pretty good shortcuts too. Every section is enjoyable to drive, and the track also looks pretty good. 17. Lakitu Park. This track was created by Melodic Cat Girl for the 9th FCFS competition, where it placed 5th. This track in a way is actually pretty similar to the last one that we talked about. The gameplay isn't super memorable, but it's just quite enjoyable throughout the entire race. This also does a really good job with the shortcuts, although I think it's pretty weird that the grass shortcut can just be taken shroomless. But I could never dislike a track that features my goat Fishbone. 16. Volcanic Volcano Vortex. This track was made by Atmosphere and Kozakura for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 7th. Trust me, I was really close to giving this one a 10 out of 10. It's a very, very good track. There is a lot of good design choices with the gameplay. I really like both of the shortcuts, and the visuals here are also great. I think they did a really good job at making the lava vortex. I don't have any complaints about this track. It's just the same as the previous tracks, where the only reason why it doesn't have a 10 is simply because it's not super exceptional. 15. Welkin Cluster. This track was created by Melodic Cat Girl and Kozakura for the 4th MRFI competition, where it placed first. This was a great winner for sure. The visuals look really stunning. The gameplay is a bit more safe and simplistic than some previous tracks, but does still feature multiple really cool ideas. I'm especially a really big fan of the Shroomless shortcut. I think it's very cool how the moving cloud is used to make it more challenging. 14. Birdo's Majestic Canopy. This track was designed by MacroDude123 and created by Kura for the 9th CTSS competition, where it placed second. Visually, this is already super distinct from all other tracks that we've seen this year, but where this track really stands out is with the gameplay. I really enjoy how windy some of these sections are. It fits the tree branch theme very well, but what this track does best is definitely the shortcuts. There are a lot of them and they're all satisfying. As such, this is our first track to get the almighty 10 out of 10 rating. 13. Something So Soda. This track was created by Morse, Iron Flash and Melodic Cat Girl for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed 9th. I know this is a joke track, but man is it a good one. They somehow managed to make a slow speed mod feel satisfying. There are multiple really cool ramps, and I'm not gonna lie, I actually also really like the visual style. This track makes me proud to be American, even though I'm German. 12. Time to Tomorrow. This track was made by Iron Flash for the 7th EXTR competition, where it placed first. Iron Flash is genuinely such an exciting new author. I'm a really big fan of the theming changes throughout the race, and the gameplay here is also extremely good. There aren't really any shortcuts, but the base layout here is just very satisfying to play. This is also an absolute banger in hide and seek. 11. Alternative Environments Inc. This track was designed by Elemental and created by Kozakura for the 10th CTSS competition, where it placed 4th. The gameplay here is genuinely incredible. By this point you can probably figure that I'm a really big fan of shortcuts, and this track certainly has a lot of those. They come with a ton of variety as well. There are Shroomless shortcuts, Shroom shortcuts, and even a star shortcut. This just barely misses out on the top 10 simply because of how stacked of a year this was. Speaking of which, it's now time to get into the top 10 of this ranking. Feel free to drop your winner predictions in the comments down below. 10. Delfino Dream. This track was made by I Swear Chris for the 9th FCFS competition, where it placed 3rd. While this isn't quite as insane as Hall of Broken Hearts, it's definitely still a very high quality effort. Visually, this is one of the strongest tracks of the year easily. Unlike my track Sunshine Paradise, this one actually does make really great usage of textures from the original Mario Sunshine, and the gameplay here is also super good. There are surprisingly a ton of different shortcuts on this track, and most of them are actually decently difficult, and I am a fan of that. 9. Ocean Vortex Thingy. This track was designed by Jacobus VIII and created by myself and Melodic Cat Girl for the 10th CTSS competition, where it placed 3rd. Trust me, I'm trying to be unbiased, but we are gonna see a decent amount of my tracks in the top 10. I do genuinely think that most of my tracks in 2025 were a lot stronger than my tracks in the previous years, and that certainly also goes for this one. First off, the theme here is absolutely epic. The way that the vortex opens, the ship sinks down, the weather turns rainy, and the boardwalk crumbles apart just cannot be beaten. I also think the gameplay turned out very well. It's a fairly short track, but it has a very fast pace, every section feels satisfying, and there are multiple pretty good shortcuts. Also, the Wario gifs when you're on the ship are just iconic. 8. Kinoko Calculation. This track was made by Pooks for the 8th FCFS competition, where it placed 3rd. This is another track that really shines through its gameplay. I've said many times before that I'm a huge fan of mushroom tracks, and this one does have some mushroom sections. In fact, the mushrooms are used for multiple really cool shortcuts. Speaking of which, this track is absolutely loaded with them. I don't know how the heck Pooks was able to make mathematical shapes and numbers into a banger like this, but I am all here for it. 7. Digital Refinery. This track was designed by Rex and created by Billy Noodles for the 10th CTSS competition, where it tied for 1st. This is easily one of the most well-rounded tracks of the year. Visually, it's extremely high quality. I am a huge fan of all the animations used, and the gameplay doesn't disappoint either. I really enjoy the split pathways section, and I like how the shortcut basically acts as a 3rd split pathway. It's honestly crazy how a track this good doesn't even place in the top 5 on this list. 6. Neuron Jungle. This track was designed by Orca Hedron and created by myself for the 9th CTSS competition, where it placed 1st. This is another track that I'm really proud of. To this day, it's probably my best looking custom track, and the gameplay isn't too far off from being my best either, but this is mostly thanks to Orca's design because it's simply such a good one. I am really happy with how the big shortcuts turned out. I actually managed to make them almost equally fast. Next time I make a forest track though, I need to add less trees, because this model middle has like 60,000 triangles. It's honestly insane how this track doesn't lag. 5. Super Wario. This track was created by myself for the 9th FCFS competition where it placed first. This is my most high effort track by a mile, and unsurprisingly in turn it's also one of my best. I'm really happy with how the visuals turned out considering I'm really bad at modeling buildings, and the gameplay here has a lot of really cool ideas. I'm a big fan of the alternate pathway across the highway, and I also really like the ending section where you take a very cool looking ramp and then you can try to land on some moving platforms to do a little shortcut. Possibly the best part about this track though is actually the exploration. After about 3 minutes, all of the aero barriers go down, and in that exact moment, the track turns into a Mario Kart world map. Or at least that was the vision, but it turned out really well in my opinion. That also makes this track an absolute nightmare on hide and seek when you're the seeker. But enough self-glazing, we need to move on. 4. Shy Guy Shrine. This track was designed by myself and created by Melodic Cat Girl for the 11th CTSS competition where it placed first. This is easily one of the best competition winners to date. As expected with Melodic Cat Girl, the visuals look really good, and the gameplay here is also exceptionally well done. Every section throws in a new idea and there are some really good shortcuts here. The track is also decently fast-paced and simply a blast to play. 3. Wiggler's Tropical Resort. This track was created by myself for the first RQRP competition where it placed last. Yes, you heard that right, this is a last place track, kinda. You see, this track actually got the tied highest score in this competition, and it would have actually gotten the sole highest score if someone hadn't given it a 1 on accident, but I didn't do as many requirements as Kura and Melodic Cat Girl, which means that my track's score was surpassed by both of them. But no matter the placement, I think this is easily one of my strongest tracks to date. Visually, it isn't anything too crazy. In fact, it's probably below average for my visual standards, but I kid you not, when I first playtested this track while making it, I was genuinely shocked at how fun the gameplay was. Every single section is just an absolute blast to play through. You've got everything from mushrooms to split pathways to wigglers to cataquacks that look like wigglers, and of course I cannot talk about this track without mentioning the shortcuts. Both of the major shortcuts on this track are genuinely incredible. One of them makes you do a very satisfying mushroom jump, and the other one has you going backwards with a star or mega mushroom or bullet bill, where you then destroy some pipes and explore a completely new section of the track. I absolutely love this track and I will not apologize for placing this way too high. 2. King Bob-omb's Factory. This track was made by Bits for the 5th MRFI competition where it placed first. After well over a year, this track finally became the first one to finally dethrone Antarctic Volcano and take the highest comp up score of all time. And let me tell you, it's absolutely deserved. I don't know how the heck Bits made basically the entire track in just 4 days, because man, it's incredible. Visually, it's already extremely strong, and the exact same goes for the gameplay. All sections feel distinct from one another, there are some really good split pathways, alongside also some very good shortcuts. And keep in mind, this is only the alpha version of this track. By now, Bits has fully finished the track and it's even more incredible than before. But astonishingly, even if I included the update, it would still only come second. Because let me tell you, the first place is far ahead of the rest for me. So, the best track made for the competition hub in 2025, in my opinion, is Dolphin Doomsday Download. This track was created by Melodic Cat Girl for the 7th EXTR competition where it placed second. Honestly, the fact that a track that takes this many risks managed to place second in the biggest competition ever is just a testament to how incredible it is. The visuals already are a very polarizing factor. To some people, they will look very ugly, but to other people, they will look insane. Personally, I find this to be easily one of the best looking tracks of the year. There are way too many visual tricks on this track that I will never be able to figure out how they actually work. I mean, when the intro cam is a freaking loading bar, you know that you're in for a good time. But of course, with me being a gameplay centered person, having incredible visuals alone won't bring a track to first. But let me assure you, this is easily one of the most fun tracks that I've ever played. The track is incredibly fast paced and it's filled with some of the most satisfying shortcuts that I've ever seen. They include bumping into a wall to gain a lot of air, bumping into another wall to fall into a cannon, and using a half pipe to fly through the ground and land on a boost panel below. And that's only the Shroomless shortcuts, by the way. And outside of that, we have not even talked about the final lap yet. There you are immediately redirected on a different pathway, and once you drive into it, you get counted out of bounds, which then respawns you on top of a giant mushroom, and that mushroom makes you go fly. Yup, you spent the entire final lap flying through the air trying to get to the end as fast as possible. It basically feels like a victory lap after the incredible experience that you've had before it. I'm sure a lot of people will have this a decent bit lower, but I can confidently say that this is my second favorite custom track of all time. By this point, I'm sure Glimmer Express Trains will never be beaten, so this track might just be the closest closest that we'll ever get to that. Huge props definitely to Melodic Cat Girl for pulling this off. Wait, hold up, don't leave yet. There are still some things left to do here. Just like last year, I'll look at every single competition. I will take all of the placements from their tracks and combine them into an average. And I'm gonna list these competitions from the lowest average to the highest to basically see which one was the strongest one. So starting at the bottom, in 11th place, we have EXTR6. This isn't way too much of a surprise, simply because this competition was split into a good and a bad sub-competition. Unsurprisingly, a lot of joke tracks were submitted to the bad sub-competition, nearly all of which made the bottom 10 on this list, so that obviously dragged down the average by a lot. However, I'll have to say, even subtracting the bad sub-competition, it still wouldn't place particularly high. In fact, it would only move up by a single spot. This was simply just not the strongest competition. In 10th place, we have MRFI 4. This also isn't really much of a surprise, since it had 4 joke tracks in a selection of only 9 tracks, and the remaining tracks are good but not the strongest. Personally, I would consider this to be the weakest competition of 2025 because of EXTR6's bad sub-competition disadvantage. In 9th place, we've got EXTR7. This also wasn't particularly surprising, but it does show that these averages don't always fully represent my actual opinion, because I actually consider this to be one of my favorite competitions of all time. There are a ton of really good tracks in here, including the first place track in this ranking, but this competition simply had a lot of submissions, 31 of them, excluding disqualified tracks, and a decent number of them were either more on the forgettable side or joke tracks. So I do see why the average lands on the lower side. In 8th place, we've got RQRP2. This one I actually personally consider to be one of the weakest competitions, which is mostly because this one just didn't have a very strong top. In fact, its highest placement in this ranking is just 39th. Its average gets saved by the fact that there just weren't any really bad tracks. Funnily enough, my favorite submission from this competition is actually a disqualified track, which sadly missed out on the ranking. Next up in 7th place, we have FCFS 9. This is definitely where these competitions start to feel a lot stronger. The top 7 in this ranking is quite high quality, even actually including 2 top 10 placements. However, the bottom 3 in this competition is sadly what drags us down a bit, as they are either joke tracks or not super functional. However, if we compared this competition to the ones from 2024, it would probably place towards the top. 2025 overall just had much stronger track lineups than 2024. In 6th place, so right in the middle, is FCFS 8. This one actually felt weaker than FCFS 9. I don't think it really had the strongest top 2, although I actually think the 3rd place was insanely good. But what definitely helps this competition is that none of the tracks were that bad. There's only one that could be considered a joke track, and it was a pretty strong one. So I suppose it's fair that this gets to place in the middle. Entering the top 5, we have CTSS 11. This is one of the smallest competitions with only 4 tracks, so each individual placement will have a pretty big impact here, which makes this competition quite lucky to have the 4th place track on this ranking. The bottom 2 was more on the mediocre side, which is why we don't see this one placing higher. In 4th place is CTSS 9. This was the first competition of the year, and it definitely started off strong. Out of the 9 submitted tracks, there was only a single joke track, and all other 8 tracks were quite enjoyable to play. It also helps having 2 tracks receiving a 10 out of 10 rating. So yeah, CTSS 9 was definitely a strong competition. Now it's time for the top 3, starting us off with CTSS 10, and yeah, this is where these competitions get very strong. The top 4 in particular is super stacked. 2 tracks find their spot in the top 10 on this ranking, and a 3rd one misses out by just 1 spot. Now, most of the remaining tracks didn't place super high on this ranking, which is the sole reason why this doesn't place higher. But I think most people will agree that this was one of the strongest competitions to date. Next up, the runner-up spot goes to MRFI 5. This is definitely the one that I consider to be the strongest competition of all time. It had 7 tracks, and all 7 of them were really good. The lowest placing track on this ranking is in 60th, which is really not that bad. And the highest placing track finds itself all the way up in 2nd. In my opinion, no other competition with a decent amount of submissions has had nearly this level of consistency. However, there is one competition that has a higher average than this one, and it's kind of cheesed, but it's RQRP1. Yeah, so this competition only had 3 submissions, which actually even includes the 3rd place track on this ranking, and since none of these 3 tracks were joke tracks, it's not too much of a surprise that it had a pretty easy time taking the top spot. It also probably helps having the highest scoring last place of all time. But honestly, the fact that MRFI 5 is not very far off from this one's average is pretty freaking impressive. But I suppose there isn't really much to be said had against RQRP1. It was just simply a very small competition. Now, also like last year, there's still one more thing to do, and I'm putting it on the screen right now. It's the same as with the competitions, but now it's all authors having their tracks put into an average. Keep in mind, this ranking isn't super accurate. A lot of these averages are greatly skewed by both the fact that there are a lot of joke tracks and the fact that the track quality this year was simply so high that some really good tracks had to place a bit lower on this ranking. Like last year, the top is mostly dominated by authors who have only submitted 1 or 2 tracks, which just so happen to be really good ones. If we only look at the authors who made more than 5 tracks, it's not too much of a surprise that Iron Flash, Melodic Cat Girl, and Kozakura make up the top 3. But it's safe to say that every single author has made at least something good in this year, and I want to give a huge shout out to all of them for making these competitions possible in the first place. And that shall be the conclusion for this video. Thank you guys very much for watching. I really hope you had a fun time. If you are interested in learning more about these competitions or even participating or voting in them, feel free to join the Mario Kart Wii Competition Hub Discord server in the description down below. This video took me a long time to make, so if you guys enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like and a sub, and I will see you guys in the next video, and as always, enjoy Wario on drugs.